they followed up pretty well. So, we have 2 days of magical learning and sharing, and some things put on the table that maybe we wouldn't have put on the table had it not been this group. But to close us out, the speaker that will essentially tie it all in a bow is the person that leads the state's efforts to grow our population, our economy, and our reputation as a place to live, work, raise a family, and start a business. It's Chief Growth and Marketing Officer, Hilary Doe.
Thank you. Hi. Thank you.
Go get 'em.
All right, thank you. Hi, everybody. How are we doing? Good. First of all, I've heard such incredible things about this conference. Did you all have a good time? Yes. Can we thank the conference organizers for doing all this hard work? Yes. All right. So I recognize that it's been a wonderful 2 days, but also all of you are probably realizing right now that I'm the only thing between you and getting to take a nap. And so I'm cognizant of that, and I'm going to try my best to make it worth your while and get in and out of here. But I'm so honored to get the chance to speak with you for a little bit today. I hope that by the end of this, you'll all realize what I've realized, which is that how grateful I am for everybody in this room, one, but two, also that our sort of work is inextricably linked. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about mine. I have already know a lot about yours, but want to know a lot more. I also hope that by the time I walk off the stage, maybe I've managed to recruit a few more partners in this big group project that we're taking on together to grow Michigan's sustainably and with shared prosperity. And maybe a few of you will be willing to help me out. Okay, so are we awake enough to get through this last one together? All right. Okay. All right, here we go. So first of all, my name's Hilary Doe. I'm Chief Growth Officer for the state of Michigan. If you don't know what a Chief Growth Officer is, that's fine. There's never been one before. So the governor put me in this position in June of last year. I'm Michigan's first Chief Growth Officer, but also Michigan is the first state in the nation to name a Chief Growth Officer because we're cool like that. Michigan is one of 34% of states that has been seeing population stagnation or decline. So it's a widespread challenge that lots of states are facing. But we're also the only state that has said, hey, we're going to take that on. Why? Because it's hard. Population stagnation and decline is the kind of thing that you can't change in 6 weeks or 6 months or one political term. And so it's the kind of thing that not a lot of people raise their hand and say, hey, judge me on this. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. In fact, it probably means it's exactly the kind of existential challenge that you should take on because population stagnation and decline has meant in some of our rural communities that it's been eroding tax bases and leading to quality of life declines. It's meant that some of our public schools have been really struggling with enrollment declines. In some of our UP communities, they've seen 48% enrollment declines in some of those areas. It means that in some cases we have really dramatic talent gaps, and we have opportunities, as you all heard in the last couple days, to lead the fight against the climate crisis, to be at the vanguard of some of these high-growth industries. And the only thing between us and our chance to do that and to serve our whole country that's rooting for us to lead this EV transition, to lead this clean energy transition, are these talent gaps. And so I'm committed to showing up for you to make sure that we can get this done, to make sure that we can fill those, build a better and better place to call home, tell our story, and grow Michigan. Not for growth's sake, not to shoot the moon, but grow Michigan so that we can keep our young folks here, retain our young people, attract young folks to Michigan, make sure that we have a value prop that works for Michiganders, build shared prosperity, and build our communities in a way that all of us want to stay here for the long term. Does that sound good to all of you? All right. Okay, let's talk a little bit about what we've done so far since June of last year. We've been pretty busy. So this was the impetus. This was the reason for why this position was created and why we kicked off this challenge. Since the year 2000, Michigan has fundamentally departed from the U.S. population growth. So since 1980, whereas the US has grown about 46% in population growth, Michigan has grown about 9%. And since since the year 2000, we've been functionally flat. A little bit up, a little bit down, but functionally flat. And if we didn't do anything, Michigan would be projected to grow at about a third of the national growth rate over the next 30 years. But we don't have to worry about that due to ooey, because we're all sitting here. So we're going to do something. But this is the challenge that we're up against. This is the shape of the curve that we have to change. And there are two underlying factors in Michigan that are driving this shape. One is domestic outmigration. So that means we're losing more folks than we're gaining, and unfortunately, too many of those folks we're losing are of working age, which is leading to the second challenge. We're aging faster than all of our neighboring states, and we're aging faster than the average US population. This isn't a reverse Benjamin Button kind of situation. It's because we are unfortunately losing too many of our young folks who are deciding that they can't build their future here and choosing to build it somewhere else. There are a couple troubling trends sitting right underneath that. We aren't horrible at retention of our folks that were born here, but if the highly educated you are, the more likely you are to go, unfortunately. And if you're a highly educated person of color, that trend is exaggerated. You're much, much more likely to go. We're seeing folks move to places like Atlanta, to places like Houston, and we need to do a lot of listening to get underneath that and make sure we're building communities and opportunities that work for all our young folks. So that's what's sitting underneath that line. Those are the trends we have to tackle. That's what we needed to get underneath. And to tackle it, here are some of the things that we did first. Building suspense. All right. First and foremost, we took on some really massive public engagement. When you talk about growth, it means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. Growth in the UP will and should look different than Grand Rapids or Detroit. So we took off and in 2.5 months did over 80 public engagement sessions with Michiganders in person, engaged over 3,000 people in rooms for listening sessions to learn what they love about Michigan and what's between them and building a future here, engaged in national polling, engaged in independent research and analysis, peer state comparisons, to learn about what drives growth in our faster growing peer states to help inform a growth strategy that's reflective of Michiganders' wants and needs, that's reflective of the opinions and wants of 18 to 34-year-olds across the country, and that's reflective of the research about what all our faster growing peer states have in common. And as a result of all of that, we poured all of that information into the other body that was created the same week that my role was, which was the Growing Michigan Together Council. So no big deal. The governor tasked a bipartisan group of folks who continuously use the word intellectual tension. Our partners at PSC, I see some folks there. I'm not lying, am I? They use that word a lot. And I can tell you that was a nice way of putting it. There was a lot of intellectual tension in that room, but they tasked a very bipartisan group of folks with coming up with a set of systemic structural changes. We're talking major changes, education reform, revenue changes, infrastructure reforms that they could all agree on. No problem. Informed by that research, that public engagement, that we thought could help us grow this state over the long term between now and 2050, and that we could commit to together, that wouldn't be fickle, that wouldn't be one person's strategy, one person's agenda, that wouldn't be fickle or partisan between political terms. And in December 14th of last year, they voted 19-1 in support of submitting that to the governor and the legislature. And it wasn't some little thing. It was bold. It was bold in its solutions. It included recommendations, I'm going to read them out to you, included recommendations for things like transit as a critical requirement for retaining our young folks in the bottom right-hand corner here. It included recommendations for housing. The Chicago Fed, for example, said that until we unlock Michigan's housing market, we won't be able to grow our state. And recommendations for incentives, like, for example, supporting down payments for young people in order to help keep them in our communities. Really unique and innovative solutions for how we could support and fund some of those different solutions here in Michigan and infrastructure in Michigan. Climate resilience was a critical part of that third bullet for creating communities that are magnets for young talent. On the top there, we identified that one thing that all our peer states that were faster growing had in common were higher and faster growing median incomes. Do you know that Michigan in 1980 had 5 of the top 10 highest median income communities in America? Who knew that? Anybody? A couple over there? All right, yeah, you did. A couple over there. 5 out of 10, we were really punching above our weight there. They included Flint, Saginaw, Detroit, right? And at that time, those communities, those sort of highest median income communities in America, were really driven by that manufacturing might. Today, the highest median income communities are more diverse, right? You've managed to make that transition to knowledge economy jobs, and in fact, higher median income communities have higher in migration, have been more successful at attracting folks in migration, whereas we've, seen domestic out-migration, right? And we looked at what some of the drivers for us of higher median income could be. Michigan also is a top 10 state for patents. Who knew that? Call and response. Come on, let's take it to church. All right, thank you. Top 10 state for patents. In fact, the University of Michigan, depending on the year, sometimes third. But we aren't necessarily commercializing those companies here, right? We have arguably the preeminent black tech ecosystem in America here right now in Black Tech Saturdays. Yeah, there you go. And we want to keep those folks here, right? We want to keep those folks here. So on December 14th, some of those bold recommendations included things like an evergreen innovation fund. Does it sound familiar? Because it was in the governor's budget recommendation a month later to make sure that we can invest in those folks to commercialize those companies right here in Michigan. Additionally in there were things like, for example, talent attraction and retention incentives. Oh, sorry. Okay. Talent attraction and retention incentives, and critically things like child care and elder care, which came up everywhere we went as elements that were knocking folks out of the labor force. Michigan trailed every faster growing peer state in labor force participation, and part of the driving force there seems to be based on, the wisdom of the community, the challenges with elder care and child care across our state, and there's a bold recommendation there. We saw bold recommendations coming out of our legislature already this session. And then third, all of our faster growing peer states had higher post-secondary attainment than we have today here in Michigan. And though we're making big strides in that regard, we need to be even more ambitious. And so there were ambitious recommendations there around a Michigan education guarantee and 2 years a post-secondary promise for all Michiganders to ensure that they can get the credentials they need in order to participate in 21st century opportunities. Because we know that there are going to be different kinds of jobs. You've been hearing about them for the last 2 days. We want all the Michiganders to be able to participate in those EV jobs, semiconductors, advanced manufacturing. And we want to make sure that it's not just attraction, but also retention. And we keep our folks here. So again, some of those budget sort of line items, including that 2 years of community college, we're really proud. Also are reflections of some of the recommendations here in this Growing Michigan Together Council report. So, no small things, no small potatoes, but 19-1 bipartisan support. And immediately when we got done with this, we got to work, right? We got to work talking about them, sharing them across the state, and making sure we could start implementing them. In fact, between our policy recommendations, our programs, including pilots that we're working with communities to implement, including working with the talent action team at MEDC, including our marketing campaign, which has already driven over 6,000 people into the jobs portal here in Michigan. Between those 3 elements, Michigan has now launched the largest talent attraction effort of any state in the nation ever in scope and scale by any measure. That's right. And one thing I want to share with you, in case any of you are wondering, this is very interesting, but what the heck does it have to do with climate? I'm here to share that I, and have been talking with folks in Eagle from day one, from the first week that I got this role, that it is a largest in the nation talent attraction campaign that is in no way confused about the fact that our best strategy for retaining young people in Michigan and attracting young people in Michigan is being honest about our strategic role, Michigan's strategic role, in the fight against the climate crisis. In fact, I was in New York yesterday at Fast Company I'm very honored to help receive an award for one of their 100 Most Innovative Companies Award for Michigan's work on talent. I'm very honored to get the opportunity to receive that on behalf of the Talent Action Team. And when I did so, I spent that time on stage getting the chance to talk about the fact that if folks walked out of that room knowing one thing, what I hoped they walked out knowing was that Michigan was the place in the whole country that had the capacity to both invent, because we're producing 4x the number of engineers of the average state, because we have, I'll go on, I have a whole slide about it anyway, I don't want to spill the beans, but we had the capacity to both invent and manufacture what's required for us to actually win the fight against the climate crisis, and I hoped they walked out knowing that the whole country should be rooting for Michigan. And when we talk about talent attraction here in Michigan, we're not talking about me going out and arm wrestling Ohio for an 18-year-old. I'm not interested. We're talking about something a lot bigger than that. We're talking about being able to rise to this challenge together, right? Because of course we want to fill our talent gaps. Of course we want to serve our entrepreneurs. Of course we want to serve our employers. Of course we want to make sure that our Michigan citizens have great opportunities and keep driving economic growth. Of course. Of course, but when I'm a boomerang. I actually grew up in Monroe County. Where's Michael at? Monroe? Oh, okay. Grew up in Monroe County, but I left the state for about 10 years, and when I came back, it wasn't for nostalgia. I came back because I was betting on Michigan's future, and specifically knew that we have a role to play that no other state can claim. With our strategic positioning, our natural resource, our industrial might, and our opportunity in the future, no other state is going to be as important. And the country's depending on us. The country should be rooting for us. So when we make the pitch to young people in our state and they pick their head up off their pillow, I hope they know that they live in auspicious times and that they're in exactly the right place if they want to do purpose-driven work to fight the climate crisis. And I hope that when we make that national pitch like we plan to do to the Gen Z folks in the whole country and say, hey, if you love finance and you're thinking about Wall Street, do it. But if you want to do purpose-driven work to fight the climate crisis, come to Michigan, because this is the front line. I hope you all know that I want to do that in partnership with you, because you all are doing your job. You're making that true. You're making sure I'm not a liar. And I'm going to back it up, right? Our team's going to do everything we can to back it up. So, a couple little fun facts. When we look at migration, when I first, again, took the role, people thought climate was relevant to my job in a really different way. So, this is where folks from Michigan tend to move to. And you can see some of the biggest dots are in the Sun Belt. This is not particularly interesting. The Sun Belt is the fastest growing part of the country. That's been true for a long time. It isn't particularly sustainable. Sometimes you'll hear about desalinating the Gulf of Mexico, for example, but it's been true for a long time. It wasn't true before air conditioning, other fun fact, but it's been true for a beat. So not particularly interesting, but when I did first take the job, the number of people who said to me, oh, this is going to be easy because in 30 years, everybody in the whole country is just going to move to Michigan. So why do you don't have to do anything. Just go kick back. But first of all, I think all of you can agree with me. One, you don't get anything by being lazy, and so there's a lot of northern coast there. I don't think that we're the inevitable option. And two, how sad. What a sad premise for a growth strategy. Is our strategy the place that was the arsenal of democracy to just wait for the world to burn and then pull the ladder up? No thanks. I think I'd quit. Yeah, that's not it, in case you were wondering what our growth strategy is. But more and more places are, of course, already struggling with this, including our own backyard, right? We are struggling with it more and more. So climate resilience, as I named, was one of the policy recommendations in our own set of recommendations for the Growing Michigan Together Council. But we are cognizant that Michigan is a climate haven for sure, and will be for folks, moving forward if we put in the work. But that's not the plan. The plan is that Michigan is a climate haven and a lot more. We acknowledge, however, and are doing the work to, put our arms around this, that young people are making life decisions based on the impacts of climate change. Specifically, this is from a recent Deloitte survey of Gen Z and millennials. Extreme weather events are a stress driver in a majority of folks in both generations. And for both generations, climate change remains a top 3 concern. For folks in this room, probably not a shocker. Probably not. But you'd be surprised the number of folks I talk to who assume this is not yet on the radar. And I'll share that if you do national polls of every age group, not just young folks, sometimes climate actually doesn't show up. But you know what does? Water. If you prime for water, it'll show up. But anywho, we're talking about young people. We want to make sure we have a value prop that works for young people. So young people, we don't want to be just a climate haven, right? But we do want to acknowledge young people are making their decisions, in part, based on climate. And in our own poll, our own national poll that's coming out here soon, and we're going to leak some to you today, we're seeing that climate's already making day-to-day life more difficult for about 30% of young folks, and that 50% are wishing across the country, in cities growing among young people, that their community was investing more resources towards combating climate change. They're wishing that they lived in a place that led with their values. I know one that's doing that, thanks to a lot of you. And so when I think about how we grow and what our growth strategy is for Michigan and how we're going to talk about this when we go out to in a national campaign, when we go out and do our marketing, when we make our pitch nationwide, sure, that climate haven thing, but also the climate innovation work that we're doing by leading with our values is the way we unlock sustainable growth. And by embracing Michigan's assets, we have, again, this unique chance to do that. The climate resilience bit is the reason why if you're, a capital-intensive business, you might want to locate in Michigan because of our lack of extreme weather events and things like that. Our unparalleled natural resources makes our quality of life incredible. But the fact that we also have 4 times the engineers of other states, a #1 national concentration of engineers and industrial designers, #1 STEM grads, history of industrial might, #10 patent creation, registered apprenticeships as well, which is both sides, right, of being able to invent and manufacture, as well as what you all have accomplished in ensuring that we have arguably some of the most progressive, exciting, ambitious climate policy leading with our values in the nation. And I'm sure you have all these facts in your head, but I shared all of them last night on stage in New York, and they blew people away. Folks don't know that Michigan is currently the U.S. Department of Energy's #1 ranked state for energy sector job growth. They don't know that we're #1 in the nation for EV industry investment. They don't know we're #1 for hydrogen investment. They don't know we're #1 for IRA-backed clean energy projects. But when we tell them, we have a case to make that, again, if you want to be on the front line, if you want to be on the Wall Street for purpose-driven climate work, where is it? Where else could it be? Who else is going to make that claim that you can have a great opportunity, a great quality of life, in a welcoming community that leads with their values, except right here? And I don't think we have a better pitch. I don't want to arm wrestle Ohio. It's not even cool, I'm not interested, but this is interesting, right? And the benefit here is that we're doing good things and, saving the world at the same time. And I can't do that, but y'all can do that. And the other benefit, I hope, right, is that if you all help do your jobs, you'll have, unfortunately, the same talent gaps that we're seeing in all the other industries, as long as we have that graph I showed you at the beginning, that flat growth, those big talent gaps. We need each other. Our fates are wedded together. We're inextricably linked. This is a group project. So I want to lock arms with all of you. Sometimes having a big challenge is scary. But what's better than one big challenge? 2. We got 2. And maybe that makes it easier. Maybe we can lean on each other a little bit. Because I think if we have two, and y'all run and we meet on the other side, we can facilitate something that nobody else can. That's what I'm betting on. And I don't bet against Michigan. I never have. So this is what I'm imagining. I'm imagining that Michigan is a global climate leader, that it facilitates our talent attraction and retention, which facilitates our ability to embrace our assets and enhance our existing assets so that we can facilitate being a global climate leader. I'm imagining that Michigan has this future as the arsenal of climate innovation, and that drives us forward. I'm imagining that in the same way that Michigan has always been a hub of innovation, that we've been creating genres and commercial products that have defined the world forever, that we're going to do it again, and we already are. And I'm imagining that if right now people aren't thinking about Michigan enough, people aren't going to be able to stop. And I'm only going to be able to do that if I do it with all of you. So the whole world should be rooting for Michigan to win. If they aren't already, let's make sure they do. All right, y'all with me? All right. Okay, so we got some positive net migration. Let's grow some median income. Let's get some talent attraction. Let's maybe, I don't know, reverse climate change or something together. Just another little one I'll add to the board. And let's go home and take one nap first. All right? Okay, thank you all.
Yeah.